Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to the Starcraft 2 Own It Shack. It's David here bringing you another episode of my Master League quest. And for today's episode, as you can see, it's going to be a Terran versus Zerg. Of course, I always play Terran, and here is my Zerg opponent on the map. What's this thing called? Central Protocol, I believe. In fact, I'm not too familiar with this map at all because I recently just added it to my little map pool of my own, I guess. It used to be on my veto list because I really didn't like it before they made the new changes to it. But now it's become much more playable, so I have enjoyed playing this map. Not so much against Zerg. It still can be kind of difficult against Zerg, but to be honest, I just really like the textures on this map, and I like the way it looks. And that's, for me, you know, really important. I really like playing on maps that kind of suit my eye. And this is definitely one of those. It's a very pretty map at least, and for that reason I think I'm going to really enjoy playing it a little bit more than I used to. So anyway, it's a Terran versus Zerg, and normally in this matchup I go for very quick Liberators. It's just something that I've always enjoyed on Terran versus Zerg because it's very easy to execute. Don't get me wrong, it is not a hard strategy at all, and it can do significant damage to the Zerg opponent if you get some drones in the start. However, this game I'm going to be trying something different. The problem with Liberators on this map is that you can't wall off your natural. Well, you can, but it takes about, I don't know, probably 8 depots or something to do it. As you can see, it's a massive ramp to your natural. So for that reason, I'm going to be going for Hellions. You absolutely, in my opinion, in Diamond League, which I am, you should go for Hellions on this map because it's the easiest way to defend your natural from Zerglings. Typically, I'll see a lot of the time Zerg players go for mass Zerglings on this map, early Speedlings, and if they run up to your natural and you don't have Hellions, you're in big trouble. And the Liberators are really bad against Zerglings. They're way too slow. By the time they set up and siege into position, all the Zerglings have run away. So for that reason, I feel like the Reaper expand into the factory, the reactor factory Hellions, is a much better strat. And as you can see, I already knew where my Zerg opponent was on the map because I sent that SCV out at around the minute mark to the right hand side of my main base, and that allowed me to see his Overlord. So I'll send my Reaper right over here and just get some scouting information. So as always in this matchup, when I send my Reaper, I'm just looking for any signs of an early Roach Warren. So there's no early Roach Warren right there, and so I'm going to try to hit up the natural, but I believe I get a little distracted by something else right here. So I start, kiting those Zerglings, doing what I can with the Reaper, and all the while my factory is just about complete, and I'll start my third base as well. Now another annoying thing about this map is that the third base, you kind of have to, you can't just throw that thing down right at the third base location. If you were to throw that base down at its final destination, you'd find that there's a very high chance that he'll just send a bunch of Zerglings or some Roaches over there and you'll have to lift it off. So you kind of have to decide whether you're going to put it in your main or your natural. In hindsight, I definitely should have put it at the natural. It's a much better spot for it because it's less travel time later when I float it over to the mineral patches. Anyway, so I'll use this Reaper. As you can see, terrible micro there. I do end up losing it. I should have known better than to be on the map with my Reaper after 3 minutes and 30 seconds, because that's typically when speed will finish, when my opponent goes for a speed first build like he did on this map. Now the other thing I'm doing, I'm pooling my Hellions first. A huge mistake I've made in the past is sending them out a little bit too soon. And when you send your Hellions out soon, you'll actually, if you lose the first two, your Hellions, the next two, are much less powerful. So this time I managed to save them both because I left them at home. As you can see, he did try that little Speedling run by. If I had Liberators instead of Hellions, that would have done critical damage probably. So now I'll be getting those gases. I did forego the early gases just because I was going for the Hellion and early expansion build. And I actually ended up going for 6 Hellions here instead of my usual 4. Because of how many Speedlings I saw. When I see that many Speedlings, I think, well, Hellions are pretty good against those. May as well make those extra 2 and see what extra damage I can do. Because clearly he wasn't going for Roaches with that many Speedlings. So I send the Hellions to the Xel'Naga Tower, take a look at what's there. A few Zerglings get roasted, and now I'm going to try to pressure what I think is going to be his third base. So, as you can see, the Hellions are traveling across the map. Meanwhile, I'm macroing up here, getting some tanks for defense in case of roaches. And interestingly enough, there is no third base. So this tells me a couple things. First, he's going to be teching up to something, and it's usually going to be either a Nidus Worm or a Spire. But given that I haven't seen a single roach yet, and nothing but these Zerglings, I'm pretty much certain it's a Spire, but I do end up scanning his base anyway, just to make sure. It's very odd to not see a Zerg player take this expansion early, and to be honest, you're going to see in a sec here, when I do scan it, I see some very interesting things going on in his base. Meanwhile, I'll start my upgrades. There goes the scan. I do see the Spire, and I'm no expert in Zerg, of course, but my hunch is that that was a very late Spire by my opponent, and it was probably just a miss macro on his part, because normally when you delay the third this long, I'm pretty sure the Spire would be finishing a lot sooner than whenever that one's going to finish. That was just starting when I scanned it, as you saw. So, Spire's going up, my upgrades are coming, and because I saw a Spire, I'm going to be making more Marines and less Marauders. Whereas if I had seen Roach Ravager compositions, then of course I would add in more Marauders and less Marines. You're going to see I get supply blocked an inordinate amount of times in this game, which is very unfortunate. But alas, my macro is certainly not perfect. It's actually quite... it can be quite bad at times. Now, here we go. I'm hotkeying all my units right there, and as you can see, I'm pooling some serious cash right now. That's a huge problem. Typically what I'd like to do right now is have a few more Marines out, because he's obviously got those Mutalisks on the way. Because I didn't end up getting the Marines out, I actually end up having to throw out some turrets because I was supply blocked. I'll kill that changeling, so I'm throwing turrets around wherever I can. Meanwhile, floating that orbital down to the third base, which is a pretty safe move right now, given that he did go for the fast mutas, and I've already got a turret station there, so it should be okay. Meanwhile, more barracks finishing up, supply depots continuing to build. Unfortunately, do end up consistently getting supply blocked in this game, so you're going to see a lot of call down supplies. And now I begin to push across the map. So you can see I send my army over there, also load up some Marines in that bunker so that if any run by happens when I'm going over there, it's not going to be a problem for me. I scan the third, and as you can see, a very late third. Really, his play right now isn't making too much sense to me, because typically when you see a late third like that, you'd expect him to have done some kind of harassment, right, with the Mutalisks. But I haven't seen a sniff of those mutas the whole game, so that's a little bit odd. Not the best opponent here, unfortunately, you know, but it's normal. I've actually been on a pretty big losing streak, so some of the people they've been pairing me up with are a little bit below where I am. That's no problem at all, of course. That's how the ladder works. Sometimes you face people that are better, sometimes you face people that are worse. It's all good. And as you can see, because I had the bunker there, that actually delayed his tack long enough that I was able to get my main army down and defend, which is very nice. I checked the Zelnaga tower, and at this point, I actually think I got a little confused and thought that some of his units were still kicking around there by my would-be fourth base, and so it kind of delayed me a little bit. Meanwhile, supply blocked yet again. Of course, this is not yet Master League play, and that's something I'm definitely going to have to tidy up. So I come in here and scan and try to get rid of some tumors. As you can see, excuse me, I siege up my tanks, and away I go. I'm going to gun down as best I can that hatchery. Meanwhile, I scan. That lets me see his army. Unfortunately, he had more than enough here to clean this up. So, sorry, I apologize. He did not have enough to clean it up. But because I knew he was going to be reinforcing from here, I did my best to just ditch after I killed his third base, knowing that I had gotten a decent advantage from that. Why I siege the tank there is a mystery. As you can see, I'm not used to this whole tank evac thing, and like I said in my last video, I will be making a future video just kind of talking about my thoughts about the tank evac and mech in general. But it's not something I'm used to, so I'm pretty bad, actually. A lot of the time when I'm about to push out, I'll unsiege my tanks instead of putting them in the medevacs, and that delays all my pushes. It's really frustrating, actually. So, anyway, my plan right now, I'm going to retreat, try to take a 4th base, and while I'm actually waiting for my upgrades to finish, I'm going to macro up a little bit more. Then once I have my 2-2, my plan is to push him again. So 3rd base is humming right now. Got a decent amount of worker saturation there. Just trying to spread out my tanks a bit. Against a Mutalisk composition, you really have to be careful to leave some Marines with each tank, whereas with a Roach Ravager composition, it's fine to have some tanks that are left kind of on their own just to zone out their army. But against Mutas, you definitely need to babysit the tanks. In fact, as a Terran player, I would say facing Muta Bane Ling is actually the hardest thing for me. I really struggle against this composition because I'm first of all more of a siege tank oriented player, and siege tanks tend to not be as good against this composition compared to Widow Mines. And the other thing is that I'm just not that good at multitasking, so you know, that's why I like mech so much, right? So unfortunately sometimes, you know, I'll be pushing, and meanwhile there are mutas in the back of my army sniping tanks, and I don't even realize it. So I sent another Marine out there just to scout out the map and see what's going on. You can see I also have a Marine at the bottom right that's just kind of patrolling between his bases, and that's going to let me know if he's going to take a 4th base. And again, I'm confused by the play, so I scan his main thinking, okay, you haven't taken a 4th yet, have you gone for an early Hive Tech? And it turns out he hasn't, so I think, well, that's really good for me, because Hive Tech, Siege Tank Marine is god-awful against Hive Tech. It's really, really bad. To do Hive Tech, you need Liberators. Now, I had already prepared for that, as you might have just seen. I built an extra starport and a fusion core, and I'm actually building a tech lab on that 2nd starport so that I can research the ballistic missiles upgrade for the Liberators. That is absolutely an essential upgrade in Terran versus Zerg and Terran versus Protoss. You need it in each matchup because the way the late game works, it's pretty much impossible to win without it. So, as you can see, I'm trying to drop here at the same time, miss my hotkeys there, and end up pulling that back. So all these little mistakes actually add up and delay my push. So now I'm pushing across the map. I'm going to try to distract him with the drop, and then push into his 3rd with my main army again. So the drop is floating over there. Meanwhile, my main army is kind of waiting around. I'm queuing up a few SCVs, although at this point I'm not too sure where my saturation is, so it's probably being mismanaged in some way. My 2-2 just finished, along with my +1 vehicle weapons, which is essential. And so I feel really good about that, and I'm going to just drop those right over there to try to snipe that Evo chamber, siege up the tanks. A little bit late there, to be honest, and fortunately I'm able to get some Banes, but look at the size of this army. I mean, this is huge. Now, I do my best to target the Banelings with the siege tanks, but unfortunately don't really do a good enough job and end up losing it. Luckily, I have some reinforcements coming. The most important thing to do when you're getting owned like that in a battle is to make sure your barracks are lit up, because without that, you can take some massive damage. So I have a few Marines here. I'll stim those forward, try to deal with the mutas, but it turns out he actually has more than enough mutalists just to kill those Marines outright, and he's doing a very nice job targeting those Marines so that he doesn't lose too many mutalisks for this. He's actually trading very nicely, and the reason I didn't die here is because those Marines right there actually killed his spawning pool, so he's unable to reinforce this with Zerglings and clean up the tanks. So that's a really nice thing for me. And I have another wave of Marines out that are coming here. I thought, briefly considered pulling back to my turrets, but the Marines pop out just in time that I'm able to clean these mutas up, no problem, so he's forced to retreat. So during that, I was able to saturate my 4th base, but unfortunately I actually ended up banking a huge amount of mules, and that's really not something that you want to have happen at all, because that means that you're not making as many Marines as you could be. So I drop all the mules at the 4th, as you just saw, and now I'm just focused on remaxing my army. I've got that Marine still patrolling, so no 4th base yet. I've got this one's patrolling over here, so I know there's no 4th base there, so that's all good. So I know as long as I keep him on 3 bases to my 4, I can just win in the end just by having more resources. I've also got that 2nd factory now. I've got my 3-3 about to finish, which is going to make for a very strong timing against him. And meanwhile, I've got still a few more mules coming up there. I decided to throw up some extra turrets around my mineral lines just because I'm sick of dealing with the muta harass. I even throw up a sensor tower just to see where things are coming from, although that probably might not be as necessary right there. Could have been better to put it in my main base and sort of see where they're coming in that corridor. Now he makes a huge mistake here and attacks into these marines and tanks with Banes and mutas. As a Zerg player, you really can't do that if the tanks are sieged, because the banelings will simply die before they can deal their damage to the marines, and that's exactly what happened there. So because I took an army lead right there, I send a medevac up to his main to drop again, and now I'm going to do my push. Meanwhile, I do set up a 5th base, because this is Legacy of the Void, and a 5th base is absolutely necessary to keep a decent income going around this time of the game. So away goes the drop. You can see it moving across there, and the main army is just going to hit his 3rd base location. So I take out the spine, and then I'm just going to leave all that, scan to make sure his army isn't around, and then I'll siege up my tanks one by one. I stim one little group of marines forward just to kind of keep track of his army and where it is, and now because his army's nowhere to be seen, this is absolutely ideal for me. This is going to allow me to spread out my units very, very well, and because of that, he actually trades very cost inefficiently here, and it ends up costing him the game. So you can see, there he goes, he GG's out of this one, and he played very well for someone in his league. He was a Platinum League player, so, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. It's great that he's being paired up with Diamond League players. It's always a good sign. It means that you're growing as a player, so that's awesome. And I really enjoyed this game. I hope you did. And like I said, if you do enjoy these videos, please feel free to leave me a like and a comment. Just let me know what you think, maybe some suggestions. I'm always open to reading your stuff. I actually read every single one, and I try to reply to them as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching this video, and stay tuned for the next one.